You've got a unique perspective, I think, amongst the breath community as somebody that's a ex-pro athlete and strength and conditioning. You've got that background.
Yeah.
And so I don't have any of that. So I look at the breath in a very different way to you.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to know, what do you think, what insights has that given you? In particular, I'm interested in strength and conditioning. What insights has that given you into the physiology of the human and the breathing?
Yeah, I think there's twofold on it, really, in that, like, part of me probably comes to breathing from a different perspective of a lot of people, because I knew nothing about breathing when I played professional rugby, and then I went into strength and conditioning, working with predominantly Paralympic athletes, and I remember I did my Oxford Vantage certification. I'd been working with athletes up until the Rio 2016 games, and then still one or two until like the Tokyo games that got postponed. And I remember when I did the training for the Oxford Vantage, it was actually just for me, for my own breathing. I was aware about the effect of breathing on brain health, and I'd retired from pro rugby because of a brain injury. So I'd actually was doing it, not selfishly, but just sort of doing it for myself. And weirdly, I don't know why, I didn't think at all that it was something I was going to use with the athletes I was training, because it just wasn't something that we did. Like, and I've got to the place now where I'm like, okay, how on earth, as an S&C coach, and a lot of the athletes with the Paralympic athletes we're working with, a lot of them were either runners or swimmers. And it's like, breathing's massively important in those things. But it just wasn't on the radar. And one of the things that I am very passionate about is going, like, why isn't this on the radar? Like, let's not think about breathing as something that we can't train, something that isn't a movement pattern like something else is a movement pattern in the body. Like, what is it comprised of? How does the functional anatomy work? What's contracting? What's moving? What muscles are involved? And then going, okay, what's the optimal type of movement that we're looking for? What's some of the ways that we can train it? And I sort of look at breathing from that S&C sort of lens, which I think I can't not look at it like that, because that's just how the background I've had in training. And so these two things come together where I'm like, I can't believe we didn't get taught and look at breathing as an S&C coach. And then I'm also at the same time coming at it as an S&C coach and going, like, okay, how do I assess someone's breathing in terms of their movement? How is it affecting the rest of the kinetic chain? How is it affecting how they put down force? How is it affecting their aerobic and anaerobic systems? Is there things that we can do that is going to allow us to optimize those systems? And the more I look at breathing, the more it can influence all aspects of our sort of physical and mental performance and recovery, which is amazing. But then at the same time, as a coach, is then quite challenging, because then the more you do everything, the more diluted it can potentially come. So it's like, it's like we can do all these things. And then I think something I'm trying to do now is go, like, okay, with all those things, how do we distill it down to the most important things for that particular sport or individual?
Yeah, I love that. If we put the like actual training to one side for a second,
yeah,
I'm really curious now, what would you do with athletes away from the training? So, like, in terms of like day-to-day breathing, because that's what I think a lot of people here will resonate with as well. Like, what do you do for their sleep preparation? What do you do for their, like, general walking around and shopping and being on the computer? Could you give us a bit of a flavour of that side of the performance?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It's one of the things that I found working, and I guess because this came from, I had this perspective myself of, like, when I first came across sort of breathing and meditation and things like this, it's like I couldn't sit still. I had a racing mind. My breathing was poor. My bolt score was really low. And I was at least interested in it because I'd seen some links to how that's going to help with my brain health. And for me, brain health was a big thing because of my injury. Otherwise, I'd have just been quite dismissive of it. And so almost for me, I'm very grateful to my brain injury, because I'm absolutely certain that without my brain injury, I wouldn't have looked at breathing. And so, yeah, it did a lot to help with my brain health, and also, like, regulation of the nervous system. And I think what I know from my own experience of being a bit dismissive about it is that the more with an athlete, from an athlete's perspective, the more I can make that sort of initial session with them feel like a S&C style session, it feels like we're training, rather than trying to get them to do something that feels quite alien to them, and to talk about how breathing at home, how that's going to help them with their performance. If they're very performance driven, that can be quite a disconnect for them potentially. So I actually start with what's the most type of things that I can get them to do and feel that feels very performance based, that helps them to go, okay, yeah, this thing I did, then my breathing felt better, and then my recovery is better, or my performance felt like it feels easier, or whatever the thing may be. And then try to do some level of education, not confusing people with science or whatever, but some level of education in terms of understanding what it is that's going on, so that, because it's very important for me that if I'm working with an athlete, that they understand what we're trying to do to a certain level, in order that they can, one, do it effectively, and two, are actually invested in everything away from the gym and the training field like you're describing. But they've got to understand, or I feel, that they're going to, it's going to have more carryover, they're going to be more consistent with it, they're going to buy into it more if they actually understand it. So it's a really important bit for me of understanding why we're doing what we're doing, so that we can do it most effectively, and then actually go, yeah, so what are you doing with your sleep preparation? How are you going to use your breathing to calm your nervous system to help improve your sleep? Is mouth taping something that we need to look at with you, like, and you know, going through all of that, not trying, depending on what the individual is like, not trying to scare them because they think you're trying to suffocate them at night time, but going through all of that. What are we doing? What things are they already doing to help promote recovery? So some of them are already engaging in like ice baths and saunas, or they have some massage tools and things like that, and going, what are they already doing away from training, where they're invested in some, typically there's normally apparatus that they've made some sort of financial investment to get something like an ice bath or whatever it is, but they're investing time, most importantly, because what's harder to do is to ask them for more time, because they're busy doing a lot of stuff, and actually they don't need to do more. What we try to do is integrate. That's a really important word for me when we're talking about athletic performance. Integrate some of the understanding and the techniques and the protocols with breathing that can optimize performance and enhance recovery. So that then looks at going, okay, what are you already doing? Right, you have a sauna post training. Well, why don't we give you a breathing exercise to do whilst you're in there? Because you're not doing anything else anyway. So trying to find those things that they're already doing away from home, and then get that across. And then, you know, ideally we get to the point where we've done something around like, okay, the understanding piece for me, talking about away from the link between breathing during training or physical exercise and performance, and away from training and away from physical performance. The link for me is efficiency. And I try to do stuff that like just seems to make sense, be simple and rational. If I can help you be more efficient with your breathing, what does that look like when you're not training? Well, more efficient breathing looks like doing less of it, spending less energy, effort and everything on it, and all that looks like. And then if you're more efficient when you're not training, you know, slower breathing rate would be one example. Well, that gives you more capacity to go to when you are going to get challenged with your breathing. Breathing rate and the amount you want to breathe in your breathing stimulus just increases as you start exercising in response to the CO2 accumulation. So if we can understand that, we can actually get excited about doing a quiet breathing, slow, gentle breathing practice whilst we're in the car on the way to training, for example. Because it's like, okay, this is going to happen. And then, you know, working with the person, it depends what do they want from it? What's the most important thing for them? Is it the performance side of things? Is it the recovery side of things? Is it actually some calmness in the mind? Is there a bit of anxiety? Like where is it for people? And sometimes they will say performance because maybe they do truly believe that, but it's sort of like surface layer. It's like it's performance, but after you've been working with them for a while, it's like it's performance and it's a little bit of like, oh, I like feeling I'm a bit more calmer, and it goes into life a little bit more. And I'll just try to meet them wherever they're at to start with, and ultimately I'm just trying to do whatever I think is going to be best for them, combined with what they're wanting at that time, and then we see where we get to.
Yeah, you reminded me of a wonderful quote. So I forget who said this, but they said, like, sell them what they want, but give them what they need. And I found that to be quite true. And I've been working with clients. It's like they might want the performance, but actually, if we can get you to get a better night's sleep and feel a bit more chilled, your performance is going to improve, on its own.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've just come back from JITS training session.
Yeah,
I've got a bit of I don't know, chesty cough thing going on. My breathing was really hard today. I felt real sympathy for some of my clients today because I was like, could not get my breath back. And I was like, wow, I was fine a week ago. What, in your opinion, working with athletes, is a good recovery breath in between rounds of, like, on the football pitch, rugby? Because, I'm trying to do I call it piggy nose. I'm lifting up the nose, I'm spreading this, and I'm trying to stay nasal, but then I've know other people that will, and they'll blow off a load of CO2 so they can go back again. So what have you seen that works best in active recovery between?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've done a whole podcast episode just on like recovery. Like this could be quite big, but I'll try and distill it down if I'm any good at what I'm doing, and I should be able to distill it down. The annoying answer is initially that it's important to just contextualize that it depends. If the training session purpose is, I want to, let me put it this way. I've got like three options almost. I've got like make my recovery easier in the moment. I've got, and then just understanding, like we'll go into understanding how breathing could be used for that. Whether I just sort of deal with the discomfort of trying to control my breathing and put things into place so that I, in the long term, will improve my recovery. But just in the moment, it's going to feel a bit harder. Or I can actually purposefully make breathing harder during my recovery so that it's absolutely disgusting in training, but that creates adaptation. The same way, like when you put weight on a bar and do squats, doesn't make you better at squats right there and then. You're actually trying to create a stress, a physical like stress they've got to overcome with a weight, a force. And once you've recovered and adapted, then you get better. So what that might look like in those three different scenarios, in order to get your breathing, or I can go before I go there, I'll go like a bit of a theme, something that I will always try to get across in my sort of like first session, if you like, in terms of managing breathing with recovery. The volume of air that you're breathing is dictated by the size of each breath, tidal volume, and the speed of your breathing, your respiratory rate. Those two things create the volume of air that you're breathing. The speed of your breathing is like the key metric in terms of if that gets too fast and you can't control it, the volume of your breath goes out the window. Yeah, becomes short and shallow. And the mechanics go out of the window. So you start becoming very inefficient with your breathing when you lose control of the rate. So being able to control the rate of your breathing, really important. So when we're thinking about recovery, we actually want to start thinking about our breathing, not necessarily thinking about, but something as a coach I'm thinking about, how can I help them with their breathing during the exercise so they're already a bit more in control before we then go and now do the breathing recovery. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So being able to manage the rate of your breathing. Your CO2 tolerance goes into that. Your psychological relationship with feeling out of breath goes into that. Your mechanics goes into that. All things that we can train. Now, if we're going to make breathing, so before we get into that, the thing for recovery that's always going to be some coaching cues from me is get control of your exhalation and try to get back to nasal. And the back is an important word in that, because depending on the intensity of the exercise someone's doing, and depending on where they're at in their ability to nasal breathe and the shape and structure of their airway, their nose, and all these things, they might have to be mouth breathing at that point. So if I say get back to nasal, it gives them permission to use their mouth. But what's important for me is that just because you're using your mouth, you don't have terrible control of the rate of your breathing and terrible volume of breathing and terrible mechanics of breathing. Because one thing that I guess a little thing that frustrates me a little bit at the moment is people see a bit about breathing and they maybe see a tennis player with their mouth taped on the training court, and it's like, all right, you've just got to breathe through your nose. And it's like, that's just one element of it. And depending on the circumstance, it might be incredibly stressful to breathe through your nose. So get control of your exhale is a really important one, and get back to nasal. Okay. Now, if I break down those three things that we said, make it as easy and as effective as possible. That would be one, yes, dumping off CO2. If we understand that the accumulation of CO2 is potentially the main driver of my breathing response, so the rate and volume of breathing that I'm going to try and do, if I use the mouth to purposefully dump off one, two, or a few reps of that, but it's a short, sharp, purposeful, using the mouth, so it's a larger vessel, so I can do it effectively in the shortest amount of time. Can I get rid of that excess CO2 that's causing my breathing rate and everything, and the cascade that goes with that being out of control? And then, so once I've dumped that off, then I'm trying to get control of my exhale, and I'm trying to get myself back to nasal. Because ultimately, when we can get back to a calm nasal breath, nervous system is calmer, we're promoting those recovery states, and also like the brain states that we get the benefits from in terms of like focus, concentration, cognition, decision making from nasal breathing over mouth breathing. So all of that goes into, that's going to make it easiest. In terms of mechanics, to make it easiest, is having the good alignment of rib cage and pelvis, and ideally the body supported. So there's a study, was it last year or the year before, where it compared like hands on knees versus hands on head for like recovery. And when people had their hands on their knees, they recover better. And the main thing that happened, or two main things that they you can deduce from the study, was that when they were hands on knees, they were bent over, they were supported. The diaphragm is not just a breathing muscle, it's a postural stabilization muscle. So it stabilizes that midline. When you put your hands on your knees and support yourself, you don't actually have to have so much tension through your midsection, and then the diaphragm has got only one of its jobs to do, more so in terms of breathing. Now, lying on the floor would be even more supported. So like lying on my floor in a supine position with my knees bent, pelvis and rib cage aligned, you're going to be able to feel much easier to get that diaphragm moving. The other thing, when that rib cage and pelvis are aligned, then so if we're upright, it's going to be like this. If we're lying on the floor, they'll be sideways. The zone of apposition, the range that the diaphragm can move through, is optimized when the alignment of the rib cage and the pelvis is optimized, which is fairly sort of obvious. If we're in the study that had like hands over heads, we typically make people go into like a lifting of the rib cage and an extension pattern, so like an open pattern at the front, and that pushing forward of the rib cage and tilting it back, your diaphragm attaches onto the rib cage. So when it's pushed forward and tilted back, the diaphragm's almost facing more out than it is facing down, and that the starting position of the diaphragm affects the range that it can go through. So if I want to recover most effectively, I want to get rid of the excess CO2, and I want to get my diaphragm functioning easiest for me and through the greatest range optimally. So that's going to be alignment, and that's going to be trying to take away its job of stabilizing my midline. So lying on the floor or having my hands on my knees is going to support me. Now, the caveat is, in professional sport, with the athletes that I have the pleasure of working with, body language is a massive thing. And if you lie on the floor, you look like you're absolutely dead. And if you put your hands on your knees, like, you get shouted at by the coach because it doesn't give the right impression. So it's sort of, I look at it and go, okay, it's telling me that, like, the importance is, like, how effectively can the diaphragm do its job, and the alignment affects that, and also the strength of it. If the diaphragm integrated in my core stabilizer muscles are stronger and I'm more effective and efficient at creating that intra-abdominal pressure and stabilizing the midline, and I've worked on the strength of my diaphragm, I can be in upright postures, work it and be able to have my alignment of my pelvis and my rib cage optimal, and also having worked on the strength of the diaphragm and the stabilizers around there and how it does part of that job, like, I can get very good and very efficient at breathing during my recovery in my upright postures. So not always going for the easiest option. If I dump CO2 and I support myself, I'm not creating an adaptation to improve my long-term recovery. So in competition, I'd be trying to optimize my recovery. In training, the majority of the time, I'm looking at, like, okay, how do I practice recovering well? Yes. But also, how do I give myself the chance to get better at recovering with some challenge? So, not doing the easy option is like that middle ground. So not dumping the CO2, being a bit miserable, rather than getting back to nasal. Can I just try to keep breathing nasally but work on the good mechanics and good control of that rate and that controlling that exhale, which will be a little bit challenging for me because of the resistance the nose is going to provide. But knowing, this is where that, like, understanding that, knowing what it is that I'm trying to achieve and why I'm trying to do it, I can logically make sense of the sensations that I'm feeling and be able to stay calm in the mind whilst recovering that breathing. Because then I'm ticking a mental skills box, or mental resilience, I'd like to call it, of you can stay calm whilst the body's feeling stressed through being out of breath. And the sensation of feeling out of breath, and, if you go one step further and you do some work with, like, the training mask and some breath holding, where it's actually, when it's quite strong, a feeling of sort of suffocation, is a real scary thing for the mind, but because physiologically it's actually a really scary thing for the body. And what you can learn is, I can control my mental state through my breathing, and it's actually through my breathing is the way that I'm creating this challenge for myself to overcome. And that builds a lot of tolerance, and resilience is probably a nice word for that. Is it a lot of resilience with us? So, that example there, using the sports mask during my recovery, I'm providing even more resistance than my nose, but I'm also the exhaled CO2 that goes out goes into the mask, and you rebreathe it in. I've got one here with me, actually, which is
the Bane mask.
The Bane mask, yeah.
Get mine.
So yeah. It's provides resistance, and the CO2 goes in there. So for anyone watching on YouTube, it's not for the faint. It's not for it's not for the faint-hearted. Yeah, but it's like weight training for your breathing muscles, as well as it's a stimulus for your the chemistry of your blood. Effectively, that CO2, once you get rid of it, it's coming back in.
I remember seeing years ago there was like a Instagram for a jiu-jitsu school, and they all had the masks on.
Nice.
I've not seen it for a while, actually. So I'm really curious about the brain, the mindset here, because I got to train with Tom Zitas, and he was the guy that did the 10-minute breath hold. And he got me to over 3 minutes from a minute in like 3 days in Corfu a couple of years ago. We did the free diving, and he taught me a load of mind tricks, but really not mind tricks, just ways to calm down. What are you doing, and what are you teaching your clients? Because that suffocation, urgency, panic, whatever you want to call it, is pretty gnarly for a lot of people. So because you know, even when I'm saying, oh, relax the mind, but that means like very different things to very different people. So can you talk us through, like, practically, what are you doing? What are you thinking about? Are you saying mantras to yourself, or are you bringing up like a moment from your history, and you talk us through that bit? Hey, I'm just going to pause the podcast for 2 seconds. Hope you're enjoying Jacko. I just wanted to talk to you about our community. It's called Take a Deeper Breath. Jacko was a guest a couple of weeks ago, so if you've enjoyed Jacko and you're in the community, you could have met him live and asked him questions. And we just had James Nestor in there as well, the author of Breath. So we are in a small private community. I go live almost every single day, so you get to ask me questions, have a chat with me. You can DM me in there. I do a live breathing class. Every Sunday we do a big thing. And each time we bring in a guest, or I'll teach something with a bit more technicality. There's a lovely forum in there. So this is a place, if you are looking to improve your breathing, or you might be a wellness professional. And I've said this before, you know, things changed me once I started looking after myself. Okay. And so the more that I breathe, the more that I feel better, the more that I can attract more clients as the practice, because they obviously see me feeling better. And so if you're a wellness professional, this could be perfect for you as well. Come on in. There's a 7-day money-back promise. So come in, have a look. If you don't like it, you can leave. I don't think you'll want to. I think you'll hopefully fall in love with us. We've got a real good mix of people in there as well. And if you join right now, you'll get a free or complimentary 30-minute one-to-one with me, where we can do a deep dive on you, on your breath assessments, what's going on with you, and I'll give you some tailored exercises. And normally people pay a fair old chunk of change for just having that one-on-one time. But I want to serve you. I want to look after people that come into the community. And so I'd love it if you've been enjoying these podcasts and you're thinking, what can I do next? For a small monthly fee, you can be in amongst a group of lovely people, breathe with us, feel better, ask questions, meet people like Nestor, meet people like Jacko, and go from there. Anyway, let's get back on with the Jacko podcast. Cheers.
I guess one thing is, and these types of interviews are always good, because one thing is that I think helps you as a coach is not forgetting what it was like when you first started. And it's very easy, because once the years go by, it's like, you know, I remember doing my training with Patrick McEwen, and I couldn't do more than 20 paces walking on a breath hold. And he'd be like, just relax into it, Jacko. And I'm like, relax? I'm literally feeling like I'm dying over here. Like, I can't, the idea of relaxing was just impossible. Anyway, so remembering what that is like, so that when you are working with someone for the first time where they're at, I think what's always really important is that there's some progressive overload, that we're introducing an appropriate level, giving them the tools to managing it, and making sense and rationalizing what it is. So again, that understanding. If someone doesn't understand what that feeling of breathlessness is coming from, and they think that they're running out of oxygen, and they don't understand that it's coming from something, they don't understand that they can control it and how they can control it, how that their control of their exhales will help them calm the heart rate. If we haven't helped them to understand that, but just in very simple, rational ways, but if I can make it simple and rational, and then gradually build them up, and we take them to a point where we go, okay, like, can we, this next one is going to make you poo your pants if you want to go there. Like, for me, I think one of the really great things about it is you are, one, helping the athlete with their mentality, but two, you're building up an athlete-coach relationship, because you're going to ask them to do something that's really quite not nice, and it only happens if they do it. They're choosing to hold their breath, so it's quite a weird, they're choosing to make it uncomfortable. Like, how uncomfortable can you make it? And I think that there's a lot that goes into understanding the personality of the athlete that you've got. But we might have met each other, had a chat. We might have done one session for an hour, and it might be session 2. It's like, actually, I've only known you for an hour and a half, but I've got to try and get into understanding where you're currently at with this. How much do you want to be pushed? How much are you ready to be pushed? And am I making it the links to them as to this thing that's going to feel not nice, probably going to feel worse than anything else you've ever done training-wise, but you're going to choose to make it happen. And then we get to see how effective can you be with the recovery bits and using what we've taught you. Can you use that in the actual real stress environment? Because what we will have done is we'll have practiced and we've taught the mechanics, we'll have felt, we've done some easier breath holds, we've gone through how to use the breath, but not with any real challenge. It's very easy for someone to lie on the floor and me get them to understand how their rib cage and pelvis needs to be, and then how their diaphragm and the ribs need to move, and breathing through the nose, having a nice clear airway. All of that is very relatively easy to do because there's nothing challenging the breathing. There's nothing challenging the mind. There's nothing challenging the breathing rate. Whereas you get someone to hold the breath, they're choosing to sort of give themselves that suffocation feeling. And then if they've got the sports mask on as well, when they let go of the breath hold, those recovery breaths that they're trying to take aren't satisfying. The alarm bells are going off in the brain in terms of the fear centers going like, hey guys, we need to hit the eject button here because we need to get rid of this CO2 and you just keep giving it me back. Like, what's going on? And all the time, it's like, whilst that's kicking off, your physiology, like is kicking off on the inside, and you're then going, okay, can I stay calm and stick to the process that Jacko just taught me before when we were lying down on the floor? But can I do it now while stood up? And can I do it whilst it's actually hard to do? And there's no sort of mantras of things. I think that there's some very practical things that help with the breath holding when you're trying to push. Swallowing, making yourself swallow as you go through. Your diaphragm involuntarily contracts in response to the CO2 that's accumulating in your blood and in your lungs. What can be helpful is you do a block. Do you like make it contract yourself? Like you feel it contract and it like scares you. Whereas you feel it and you go, no, I'm going to, and then you contract it. So you do what I call a blocked inhalation. You try to breathe in and make your diaphragm contract, but you're taking control over it rather than it. So you contract and then you relax, but then it will come back. But it's like, can you get comfortable with those contractions and feeling like you're in a bit of control of it is one. The swallowing also helps. Having a target, whether that's a visual target or a counting target of like, I'm going to do X number of steps or X number of things on the bike or whatever it is, having some sort of target to work towards. And just sort of, we make that little promise. I go like, where are you going to get to halfway? Are you going to, where we're going to get to? Okay. Well, I promise to you that nothing bad is going to happen if you get to that point. If you just need to promise that you're just going to hold your breath until we get there, then we make a little pact and off we go. And it's actually fairly mind-blowing how much progress someone can make in literally one session, which might consist of only 5 breath holds, because it's the mental side of it that we're training. Longer term, you're then actually changing the physiology and the chemosensitivity to CO2, but in the short term, it's not happening that quick. But what is happening quick is you're changing their perception of what stress is and how they can overcome it. And I think that's super special. And I don't think I've actually articulated it as well as that before. So thank you for the question. But I think it's special, and I think it's something that we're quite a long way off it being a well-used, recognised thing. There's little pockets of people doing it in MMA, me in rugby. Like there's little pockets of people, but there's not loads. But as a good friend of mine, you met Nigel as well from New Zealand, Nigel Beach from New Zealand. He, he's worked with some of the best rugby players in the world, the All Blacks. And his big thing that he says, Jacko, mate, I'll put it on his accent. He's like, if people aren't doing this, they're going to get left behind. And that's his big thing. Is like, if you are not going to utilize what breathing can do for your performance and your recovery and your mental state, in terms of top level sport, you're going to get left behind. So it's like, let's do it now. Let's get on it.
Yeah.
And it's fun. Like it's fun. It's weird. It's like type 2 fun is. It's like basically how someone goes, what do you mean it's fun? It's fun for you because you're making them do this thing. But no, it's fun in terms of like, it adds a different stimulus to your training that you've never really experienced before. And it can take something that's quite boring. Fitness and stuff often and conditioning is boring. And it adds something different to it. The other side of it, very quickly, is that you could create an anaerobic response during an easy aerobic session with breath holding, which that really comes into play with like coming back from injury and actually reducing any deconditioning, or trying to reduce as much as possible deconditioning that happens when someone gets injured and they can't work at that high intensity. Maybe they can only work at 50%. Well, we can still, in terms of a musculoskeletal system, work on their anaerobic system through breath holding rather than it being through high intensity exercise. Another version of that could be in season, we don't, like, in order to work on like lactate sort of threshold tolerance work, really anaerobic hard training, you've got to go in the red zone. You've got to go red line. Otherwise you're not going to create that adaptation. And when we go in the red zone, risk of injury is high. You're asking someone to go as hard as they can and giving them very short rest periods. Risk of injury is significantly high. We can make them potentially work at 85% of max. Risk of injury goes down, but the session in terms of like how their body is experiencing CO2, lactate, drops in oxygen is flipping off the charts still. Yet they're only working at 85% or whatever the thing may be. So we can start to get very clever with, not clever, but we can start to use it very strategically, which is just the flip side of going, everything else I described to there was like, basically like taking someone to a mental red zone for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's very interesting the balance between the mental side of breath holds and the chemo kind of physiological side of it, and those two things play huge roles. How do you screen for both of those? I know you've probably got the steps test and we've got the control pause. Are you looking at anything else when you're screening your clients? Not the mechanic side, but I'm talking more the chemistry of the CO2. What do you look for?
No, not I'm not. Yeah, I wouldn't be screening. The only other thing we might do is like, if it's a pro athlete and it's appropriate, depending on what their scores were on those other two, would be like to do some harder breath holds than walking, maybe on like an assault bike or something, and just see what are they like with a maximal breath hold with some like higher intensity work. What does that look like? And but it can start to become part of. I'm like quite a big fan of using, rather than like testing and training, there's times where it's like the training can be part of the assessment. So if I'm going to do a couple of sets of breath holds on an assault bike with them, and set the intensity, well, how they do in that is actually part of my assessment of how are they dealing with higher intensity and breath holding combined, which is, it's difficult to like decipher that of like how much of that's mental, how much of that is chemo, but it's definitely a little bit more of both. And if someone's definitely struggling with the mental side of it, yeah, they won't that breath hold with some higher intensity stuff will be much shorter. But you'd likely see that in the differentiation between their step test, so how many steps they can do breath holding, versus their Bolt score or their control pause. You would likely see those two things not matching up if they're struggling with the mental side of breath holding. But you definitely see it if you do it something a little bit more intense. And I think that's really important from a perspective of, we need to get them comfortable and calm, but need to get them calm in terms of their response, being able to do that before we try to push anything further. As well as that the Bolt needs to be at an appropriate level, the actual their own sort of mental response and calmness before we start doing harder stuff, and before we start doing stuff with this and the sports mask and breath holding. But you can introduce the sports mask for people in a breathing mechanics drill, lying on the floor. No challenge at all, completely at rest. But let's see what that resistance, how does it feel like to overcome a little bit more resistance? How does it feel like that some of that CO2 is going in? But you're just lying there, you're not doing anything. Like, there's always a way to introduce something to people and to make it progressively easier, or regress it back to a point where they can start. Yeah.
We've only got a few minutes left. I'm just curious to geek out a little bit, if you know this, because I'm still struggling to find a good answer for this. What's the difference between when we produce, doing a little workout, we're producing CO2, with nasal breathing, CO2's gone up in the body, you can measure it with the capnography, you can measure the amount of CO2 being breathed out. When you breathe back in CO2 through a face mask, so you've got like endogenous CO2 that's in the system, but then you're breathing it back in again. Any ideas on what the difference is, if there is a difference there, in terms of, like, I'm slow breathing and my CO2 is high in my body versus I'm bringing CO2 back in? Because I feel like something's going to be different there. A bit like when you take vitamin D versus you go into the sun, synthetic compound versus... Have you come across anything there?
I know what you mean in terms of...
is it doing
I think I know.
Different?
So you're in normal atmospheric air, CO2 levels are about 0.04. Mm-hmm. In your exhaled breath, it's about 4 or 5%. So it's going up by 100 times because the body's generating it. The CO2 that you say, if you're using a breathing mask, that goes into the mask, and then it's not all going to stay there. It's not like airtight, but some is going to stay in there. So we don't know exactly how much, but a much stronger, bigger proportion. But that exhaled air is a bit sort of, people describe it as like, it's a bit like stale air rather than the air the fresh air that you're then rebreathing in. The levels that you will create with the mask, having not measured it but knowing what it feels like, the levels of CO2 is going to be significantly higher than just doing a breathing light whilst exercising. That'd be pretty confident about, just because of knowing what that feeling is like with when you're using it. Does that answer it a little bit?
I guess I'm curious, and this is because I'm about to try something. I'm going to get this thing called a carbo inhaler soon, and you can ramp it up to 8,000. And so the plan is you're meant to do it every day, and you ramp it up, and you can reset your chemoreceptors quite quickly with this. James Nestor spoke about a different version where he did a 30% CO2. I'm just curious. The difference between bringing in CO2 versus producing CO2, because I feel like they're doing different things in the body, but no one's been able to give me a really clear answer what the difference is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's with like the scenario, the example you were saying, like with breathing light whilst exercising, trying to keep some in whilst exercising, is I just don't necessarily know that you're going to be able to manage keeping enough in like you would from that you're going to re-inhale with a mask like that. But if you're getting a device that's actually it's sending more. See, it's not just your exhaled air, it's actually you're controlling the amount that it is, and that can be, you can control how high that is. I think Nestor talked about in his book where, like, basically if you make it high enough, you can have anyone would have a panic attack. I know. Well, I'll be fascinated to hear. Yeah, be interesting to know actually be very interesting in that if it can alter chemoreceptors, but you haven't necessarily, in a very short space of time, but haven't gone through the psychological sort of discomfort and calming the mind in response to all that stress, how much does it actually help you with the psychological side of like feeling out of breath? Yeah, it would be really interesting to try and separate those two things a little bit.
Bit like going for a tummy tuck. So you've not really done the weight that, that let's say you've not done the work to lose the weight, you've lost the weight. Like there's a psychological element there. Anyway, we could get this as another conversation. I'll share with you afterwards, like the device and stuff. Last question, because we're out of time. Can you give us the 60 seconds or less answer to the question I get so much, which is how should I breathe when I'm running? So what's the short version of that?
What's the short? Yeah, I can't answer anything in 60 seconds. How should I breathe when I'm running? I would suggest that it is important that your the amount you're breathing matches the intensity that you're running at. So if you're running slow, you don't need to breathe loads. The faster you're running, your breathing is going to have to increase. Key sort of things that I try to get across and try to use in my own like distance running, like the ultra marathons that I do, is like maintaining calmness to the breath to keep the nervous system calm. That helps us with like if it's, for me, the ultra stuff is like we're trying to run for longer. Regardless of what it is that you're doing, whether it's like ultra long distance stuff or it's short stuff, being able to utilize the diaphragm, which comes from good alignment of the rib cage and pelvis, rib cage expanding three-dimensionally, diaphragm functioning and moving correctly to create intra-abdominal pressure on the inside, that helps with things like force transfer whilst you're running, as well as the breathing, is going to be probably the most important thing from a running perspective. If your breathing isn't calm and goes really fast and from the mouth and you start panting, it's highly unlikely that you have got those things in check down below. So breathing through your nose and trying to be calm with your breathing, and calm being relative to the intensity you're running at, is, with some training, got the potential to be very helpful for those things. But regardless of whether you're going to use your nose or not, depending on where you're at with it, you still need that rib cage, you need that diaphragm, and you need that intra-abdominal pressure that you're creating to be optimized if you want to optimize your performance. And I say again, like the rate that you breathe, the speed, the rate at which you're breathing is like your key metric. Because once you've lost control of that, your mechanics go out the window and the volume that you're breathing with those breaths goes out the window.
Slippery slope. Yeah, because I've heard people, and it gets a bit complicated, you should breathe in on every fourth left step and exhale. And I was like, whoa, it's just...
Yeah, it's too... Yeah, I don't
like that. That's useful.
I don't buy into that type of thing because it's too prescriptive.
Yeah.
We could become robots.
Exactly, yeah. And everyone's running at a different pace and everything's... Cool, dude, that was a real pleasure. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you and do something after this podcast?
Instagram is probably my most active social media, so it's jacko.david.jackson, and then website is probreathwork.com. I've got a Pro Breathwork app, which is on the Apple Store and Google Store, and there's free course on there. Foundations of Breathing is a completely free course, has all the basics in place, because I think that like the basics of good breathing are important for everyone. There's a bit on breathing for exercise, breathing for sleep, as well as the mechanics, as well as the biochemistry. So I think it's like 7 modules to work through at your own pace.
Nice, beautiful. Pleasure as always, my friend, and I'll speak to you soon. Cheers.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for sticking all the way through till the end. I really appreciate your time and energy and focus. And I hope you enjoyed Jacko. You might want to go back and watch the previous podcast now if you enjoyed that as well. And I always like to take a couple of bits away from these podcasts. You know, I don't want it to just be like Netflix where you've enjoyed something but there's no changes. And so the bits that stood out for me were, really relaxing the body, the difference between the CO2 chemistry, but also the mindset. And also stuff around blowing off CO2 when you're in recovery or making things harder. So they were the bits that kind of stood out to me. What stood out for you? If you want to learn more about Jacko, the details are down below. And you might have heard him talk about this halfway through the podcast. Please consider coming into our private community. It's very sexy. It's very cool. I have to say, I'm so happy. This is what I was looking for years, and it's a bit weird that I'm in charge of it, but I built it because I couldn't find it anywhere else. And this is just a place to deepen our knowledge of breathing. It's a place to connect. It's a place to have people like James Nestor come in and answer questions with us. It's a place where Jacko came in and took us through a whole class. It's a really cool place, and we're just getting started. Every month there's going to be a different modality. So we've done mechanics, now we're doing chemistry, we're going to do coherence, we're going to do qigong, we're going to do sports performance, we're going to do conscious connected breathing and a load of other stuff, and bring in experts to teach us, so I get to learn with you. So I would say, look, the link is down there. What have you got to lose? At least go and have a look at the kind of what it's about. Come in for a week. If you're not happy, just drop me a note, so I'll give you a full refund. But I think you'll come in, you'll love it. You'll get a one-to-one with me if you sign up right now. That's 30 minutes where I will deep dive with you for what's going on, what can we do to support you, what are the best breathing techniques for you. And there's a ton of stuff in there. You get a functional breathing course that's like $500. There's a load of MP3s now, they're like $100. There are so many masterclasses from experts in there. So it's full of stuff, and I would highly encourage you to come and check it out. Thank you again for being here. As always, we finish with a breathing exercise. So we'll jump into the breathing exercise now, and then after that, maybe you'll consider coming into the community. All right. Thank you so much. Pleasure serving you, and I'll speak to you soon. Cheers.
Welcome to Take a Deep Breath. Today's breathing exercise is a coherence breathing at 4 breaths per minute. So this is a super chilled, slow, gentle, relaxing practice. So get yourself nice and comfortable, and we'll begin in a moment. Exhale. Inhale. 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 Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. That's it, you're done. You're exactly where you need to be. For maximum results, practice this technique daily so you can save this video and come back to it anytime. And if you're looking to take your breathwork practice to a deeper level, then why not subscribe to our newsletter, Breathwork in a Blink? It's completely free. It takes less than 5 minutes every week to read it. It comes out every Friday. And in there, I'm sharing with you my favourite breathing exercises of the week, studies and podcasts and articles, and interesting facts about the breath that can help you and your family and your friends learn to use the breath to be more calm, more present, more efficient, more relaxed, all the good things the breath does. So subscribe to Breathwork in a Blink. The link is down below. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you on the next video.